Welcome everybody, Spare Bedroom Studios, Solo Spotlight with Ryan McDougall. I'm here with my wonderful guest, Katanya Timinsky. Yeah. I'm horrible with names. I apologize. Thank you so much for coming on. Photographer, traveled internationally, keynote speaker, huge advocate of volunteering. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And I'm really excited. I was able to watch some of your work, and it was very inspiring. So I hope the audience is able to get a very insightful conversation from us. But let's get going. For people that are seeing you for the first time, kind of, where does your story start, and how does it kind of lead you into where you are now?
So I've actually always been an artist ever since I was little. The second I could pick up a pencil, I was drawing and then diving into coloring, painting, and throughout my life, I thought it would be intertwined in some capacity, but I thought it was more of that physical media in itself. And as I grew into adulthood and kind of figuring myself out, I realized that you can be creative and it needs to have a function of some capacity, unless you have maybe contacts in the gallery world, you know, but you got to work your way up to that. You got to have a strong network. So that's kind of what has led me through my journey, has always been an artistic soul.
Nice. Yeah, that's interesting you say that too, because it's one of those things where a lot of people get into like art and creating stuff, and then they find like it opens a whole new door for them, if that makes sense, where they're like, oh, I went into it for this and like to capture moments, but like I'm gaining a whole worldly understanding of something completely different. And with that creativity, was that something that you kind of knew that was your why, or how did that kind of turn out? Was that kind of a calling for you, or how did that work?
I think it's just been intertwined so deeply as a form of expression, channeling my energy. It's just fluid. So it just pours out of me in one way or another, whether that's cooking or, I don't know, even designing and decorating a home. It's just a part of my personality trait, but it's quite infinite in today's day and age, just the different directions you can take with it. And I mean, I've been told my whole life it's like specialized, but I mean, life is all about exploration and exploring different mixed media, so it never stopped me. And I guess it's always been kind of the journey of like, what is it? So it's kind of been a progression between so many different medias up until like now, photography, videography. So
that's really cool. Any was there any like standout moments for you, or like standout pieces where you kind of knew that this was like a career path or journey per se that you wanted to like continue? Did it start as a hobby and then it kind of like something struck and then it was like, oh, I'm actually like really good at this?
Yeah, I was always very curious about photography because, you know, once I was painting and, you know, you have to spend so much money on materials rather. I always wanted to get into photography, but the whole technology piece kind of felt daunting. And what prompted that is actually dealing with some loss in the family and inheriting this camera. And through that whole process was really capturing life in motion and kind of seeing the beauty of that moment. And then, you know, you have conversations with people. What are you doing? Oh, well, can you take portraits? Can you do headshots? Oh, can you photograph a wedding? Oh, would you work with us on an album? And then it just kind of took a life of its own. I did end up taking graphic design courses during that time. So that whole mixed media marketing kind of assets kind of already had begun, but the photography side really blew up, and it was such a beautiful way of telling a story or giving those moments to people, because that time is so precious. We don't realize it, especially when we look back at old photos. They have so much more meaning to us, you know?
That's Now, do you find that like when you were starting professionally, what was the thing that kind of allowed you to like diversify, if that makes sense? Was it more people coming up to you and asking you for certain things and that's where the challenge began? Or was it more like offering, like say you never did a wedding, or you never did this, or you never did that? Was that something that just came through like those opportunities, or was that like actively, like were you like, I want to try that?
Yeah, it was more like the opportunity present itself, and then I love a challenge. And I was like, okay, I'll do all my research possible and let's just give it our best shot. And yeah, it just became one project after the other. And even so, it's the interesting part I find about photography as well is you can be a fly on the wall and just be that person that captures that candid moment, that event, allowing people to be in their element. But then there's this whole other side of photography where we all have walls that we build up within ourselves, what we see on the media and how we think we need to be. So when a camera is in front of a person, they freeze up. You have to learn to bring that wall down, and I actually find that very addicting. And some people can't do both. I feel like you got to understand almost the psychology behind it, but I love it because I think if you can capture someone's soul essence, there's something very powerful about that.
And it takes a skill. It like you said, it takes a whole nother skill about like understanding like behavioral psychology and like human dynamics, and even translate to what I do is like, say I'm interviewing someone and like I can see that they're switching their legs, and it's like, okay, I better wrap this up soon, because it's like they're getting antsy, right?
The body language,
right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool because I think that type of mindset is very rare in terms of like, because doing the photography is one thing, and that's its own like flow chart. And once you hit one thing and you switch, it's a whole nother thing. And then understanding the human element of it is like where some people will just be like, I just do photography, right? It takes a type of person to be like, no, this is what I need to like get to the next level, or get the most out of my clients, if that makes sense.
And make the best out of your scenario, whether that's, you know, your ideal lighting, or just working with a family where the kids only have a 20-minute window before they've tapped out. It's just, you learn how to make the best out of your
Do you find there was any moments that you had where you were like, oh, is this for me? Like, do you find there was any like, you know, hurdles in terms of like,
sometimes, I'd say after a while, I really connect well to couples that like it flows. It's hard to articulate. It's like usually I'll do a sit down, a coffee meeting, and I kind of get a feel of who they are. And sometimes there's people where they're just more high stress, and like it's just a different kind of engagement, right? And so maybe there's times where I'm like, oh, this could have flowed maybe differently, but it really just depends on the people that you're working with and kind of how you show up equally each day or for that shoot. So yeah, you learn, right? There's definitely wins, there's definitely room for opportunity in different scenarios, and you kind of just have to learn to adapt or prepare for it in some way, ask the right questions prior to, kind of see if it's in alignment with you.
Do you find that like that type of skill like translated well into other areas of your life, in terms of like, I always find that like my ability to like be patient, or like asking like questions in a certain way, or like reading people's body, or even like I said before with my career, it's like given my experience, I'm very able to be like, oh, something's gonna happen, right? Now for you, is it like you're just better at like getting to the root of the problem, or like better at having that conversation overall now because you've kind of like tested yourself?
Yeah, like, because let's say the whole rundown for a wedding, I try to manage people's expectations, try to explain, hey, if you got someone the day of the wedding, maybe have someone that's going to line up the family, make sure that we're not hurting, like we're directing people so that we can get the best quality of photos done in a day. Also too, like, it kind of depends on how the couple is. I just am thinking weddings because it's
of course
the most relatable, because it's high stress, there's a high expectation, there's a higher dollar figure involved, so there's a higher expectation the day of. But then I even think, like, I try to like lay out the whole itinerary of like what would be the best results for us, and it really is just like trial and error through it, and then you get much more proficient. And then I always just try to articulate things in the moment that I see to ensure that we can get the best result,
right,
and manage their expectations too.
Yeah,
right?
that must be a huge one, of like, because you have the insider knowledge and the clients don't, and it's kind of like a weird thing where if they're stressed, it's like, I totally understand, like that makes total sense. If I was in your shoes, I'd feel the same way, right? It's that, and even just being like, you probably have to stay fairly grounded too, because it's like, well, if you start like going crazy, it's like you're like you could be like the catalyst of everybody freaking out, if that makes sense.
You don't want to be the bearer of stress. I actually had a wedding recently, and the bride was very laid back, and we wanted to get a few more things done. So instead of me pushing that stress onto her, I addressed it twice, and then I let her do her thing, and then I said how we could redirect it to ensure that we don't miss that opportunity. And it's true, you can totally exacerbate a situation, and then it doesn't translate well in the images at all.
No.
You're
forcing people.
Yeah.
It's the same with if I like push some for an interview. Like after I try like twice, it's usually like, well, at this point, like they're just plopping down and going, all right, hit me. And you're like, nah, I'm good. Right? It's and like it's one of those things, like it's their moment. So it's like, hey, if you want to do that, like I'm just here to facilitate, right? It's interesting you say too about being like a fly on the wall too, because like how much do you need, like how much is it a necessity to like be out of the way? You know what I mean? Like how much of it is like, I don't want to like interrupt anything, but I also want to capture these moments. And what's like how's that balance work?
Oh, there's definitely a sweet spot to it, and it's all based on scenario, but it's true, because there's been scenarios where I've done like specific shots, and if I would have had a different lens on, or kind of taken a few other steps, like you see those missed opportunities, because of course we're highly critical of our work as creatives, as photographers. Right. I'm sure we can always see how we can do better. So it's just a matter of like play and being open to it. And I sometimes bounce off even other people's work and kind of see how they captured something. But what I find so interesting about photography too, it doesn't matter, 3 people could be lined up with the exact same gear, the exact same lens, and everyone will take it differently. Yeah. So what makes yours original?
Yeah, that is true too, where a lot of times when I interview people that are creatives or someone creating anything, is like the idea of like managing that ego, right? And like managing that self-esteem, and how kind of daunting that task of its own, of like not being hypercritical, being okay to make mistakes, as well as like not taking it too seriously, right? Where it's like, well, something happens, it's like, all right, well, how do we get past this? Or like someone criticizes you and you're like, no, I'm the best, like, so I think that's a very big thing that I find is another one where you kind of have to like, you got to check the ego at the door, and you kind of have to be like, I'm just going to put my best foot forward, and like hopefully everything, and if I do make mistakes, it's like, okay, let's run it back and see where I could have fixed things, and no harm, no foul, right? But I think a lot of times where you see like people have, failures or quit too early or stuff like that, a lot of times it's because you're doing too much, or you're doing everything and nothing at all, right? So I find that if the motivation's pointed in the right spots, people can get to the right place. But if they let things take control of them and they, they allow that ego to kind of break them, then that's it, right? So yeah, and then so photos and documenting others, you kind of alluded to this idea of like internal healing. How would you define that? Like this idea of, seeing someone else's like experience and like getting like gratitude and like gaining that internal healing for yourself. Do you find that that's like a thing that happens every time?
Maybe not every time, but there are those moments that really stand out. Sometimes business is transactional, unfortunately, but I really try to have that genuine heart with each interaction, trying to make it an experience, and actually making a connection. Because you could shake hands, part separate ways, and it's like any other business transaction, but I really try to connect with people. I really try to relate, but I don't want to just impact other people. I know it helps me in so many ways. We obviously live in a digital landscape now, and it just feels like interactions almost happening less and less. I could go on a whole rabbit hole on that, just in regards to how we're shifting as a society and as a collective.
Oh yeah, it's what's in it for me. Mita. Yeah. Give me my money now. Yeah. People don't even want to talk to you unless you're paying them.
Yeah, and then it's like dopamine hit online, and it's just like we're forgetting that we need to like interact face to face, and we do have to be comfortable being in front of a camera and loving ourselves. I mean, like, even as a woman living this life experience, like the amount of filters that are out, the amount of things that we do as women to try to change our appearance, and if I can make one small impact to make people feel seen, make people feel good about themselves, that's super powerful.
Now, what do you do yourself to keep yourself like grounded?
Well, the way I kind of see it is, when you're a kid, you're governed by your parents, and then when you become an adult, you have to parent yourself. And we forget that oftentimes. There's actually a really interesting stat that I've been telling so many people, and I find it so fascinating. Did you know that only 10 to 15% of our population is actually self-aware?
Yeah, that's crazy. But it's funny because Chris, I think his name's Chris Williams. He does like I forget what the podcast is called. But he said this, it's like the ironic tragedy of like, but if people weren't so self-aware, would they have better lives? Like, would they have better lives because they're not thinking about as much?
Yeah.
Right? It's because I have people at work where they walk around, their head is in the clouds. And it's like everybody's their best friend and they do nothing wrong and this and that. And like they don't see anybody's, like nothing, right? And you're like, well, this dude seems generally happy. Like, true. So it's like this very weird paradox of like, oh, he probably should know more, but with knowing more, he's probably going to get a little more depressed, right?
Yeah. And then, of course, like, almost being too self-aware, you can get really stuck in your head in the process
like a thought
too.
Silo.
There's definitely a balance between having your head in the clouds and your feet planted on the ground.
Yeah.
But all I can say as a woman in my own experience, I mean, like with the constant changes and growing increase in aesthetics and makeup and everything, it's just like I always try to bring myself down to earth and really just love myself as much as I can internally, and if I can give that to other people, if I can share that, I mean, that's...
Yeah, and that's kind of all you can do, right?
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, that's kind of all you can do is just, like, give a good representation of, like, what you're trying to show, right? And that's... I think that at the root is, like, yeah, like, that's all, like, you could... Because I always think... today too, in today's day and age, like there's a lot of times where I'd love to give people advice, but I also know that it's in one ear and out the other. Where you're like, you know what? It's like this person's just gonna have to figure out for their own, unfortunately. And it is very, very tricky to like have like maintain like relationships with people and friendships and stuff like that, because in today's day and age, like people are just pulled in so many different directions that I even think of myself and like these like complaints people have, like, oh, this person like never shows up to this or never does that, and you're like, yeah, but like I also know like the requirements just to like survive in today's day and age is like crazy, right? But then like you travel to Ukraine in June 2022 and you start volunteering. This kind of totally like takes away from all of that, like in our like North American society and how like we view things. And then you go to Ukraine in June and it was probably like a whole flipped, like Inception just shifted on its head. We're like, wait a minute.
Mind blowing. Yeah.
So talk to me about that. June 2022, you're on the train on your way into Kyiv.
Can I back it a bit?
Yeah.
Okay. So a big thing for me through my journey in photography is, you want to get that next big picture. You want photos that tell a story. As a girl that grew up flipping through National Geographic, there's something about travel, culture, adventure that's so fascinating. Like there's just a whole big world and we live in this little pocket, Edmonton. Mm-hmm. And a big thing for me was COVID. Was a very tough transition. Like it just, regardless of people's view, it felt like a war against people, and I'm a very community-based kind of person, so seeing that was very hard for me internally. You feel very isolated, you kind of feel stuck, being jammed, looking at the news. And ironically, right at the tail end, I photographed a wedding in Mexico. And I'm flipping through my Instagram stories and I'm like, there's literally people in bunkers right now. It's 2022. How are people getting up and going to physically fight another country? Like, yeah. Maybe that's my, very naive and...
I think it's hard for anybody. Like, I think that idea of like that type of risk is it's very hard for a lot of people to comprehend if they haven't like been in. It's like being a nurse and then like, your desensitization to certain things. It happens so quick because of the experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I was blown away. I felt very called. I am Ukrainian, but didn't have too many connections to my roots or the traditions or the language. And so I kind of left it, kind of felt like something was stirring in me. And I actually went to an Oilers playoff game. I went into Rogers Place. I'm looking at the 50-50, and I think it's great that a lot of those funds, half of the funds, make it to a charity of those, of a particular, charity of people in need. But then, there's a level of incentiveness that goes towards this, and something in that kind of felt, I'm like, is that really the answer? While there's people outside panhandling, because there's been so much disparity just between the division of the middle class and like just people in a bad situation going into a worse situation. So I just felt this calling within me that I am like, I need to do something beyond myself. And so I ended up knowing someone that worked in the United Nations, and they said that they had had a contact that was starting an NGO that supports women and mothers in distress. We would like a Canadian-Ukrainian photographer. Would you be interested? And it was an immediate yes, and I kind of kept my cards close because I just didn't want to... The thing is I'm finding more and more that I get older, there's a lot of people that want to express their opinion, and you kind of have to be mindful of those things because they will share it out of care, but I take it on and I'm like, this is my decision. It doesn't change that. I don't want people to kind of feed into kind of like what my decision would be. So
do you think that, sorry for cutting you off, but do you think that is like with everything you do? Do you think like when you make decisions, sorry, I just have to fix your,
no worries.
Just right like that.
Got it.
Perfect. Because I echo that thing where I'm like, if I have an idea in my head, like I don't tell us, because it's like just someone giving me a facial expression. I'm like, bad idea? All right, cool. Not gonna do it.
I would say I've always been an open book, and then it's shot me in the foot a little bit because, people, of course, they care about you, or maybe they just want to be heard. Maybe they just want to share an opinion, but maybe it's not conducive. Maybe it's actually not going to benefit you. Obviously, people do not want you to,
And the opinion with you going to Ukraine, I think it carries a little bit more weight given that it's an active war zone, right? So like I think that, but again, you also have to weigh the fact of like, well, how much am I like doing this for myself? How much am I doing this? So then it becomes more of like no, this is like I have to get this done. Now, what was there any like big apprehensions? Like obviously the fact that they're at war. But like, what were some other, getting food, like was like shelter, supplies, like anything like that? Was that a bigger worry, or did you kind of trust the NGO that they kind of knew what was going on? Or
I put blind faith, for sure.
I did dream about, what would happen if there was a shockwave and stuff. And it was kind of hard to fathom, like really to fathom it. You see movies, you see everything that kind of gives an idea of what it would be. But until you're actually knowing that this could be your reality, it's hard to wrap in it. So, fast forwarding to on the train and seeing tape on the windows, and it really starts to become a reality. Yet, there's young families going back. And so you just have this almost blind trust that you're like, okay, well, if other people are doing it, maybe there is something to that of like how we have a tendency to kind of follow others, not really knowing, not of our best interest, but it's not stopped these Ukrainian people to go back to their home.
Yeah. I want to dive deeper into this because I think it's amazing that you had the courage to take on that type of opportunity, but let's talk about like gaining access to Ukraine and like the emotional challenges that came with that, but B, like the kind of, you're probably there, you don't speak the language, or you're kind of probably understanding certain phrases or something. But take me through like the initial like getting there and kind of becoming acquainted and like establishing who your contacts are and how you're supposed to behave. Was that like a bigger, task?
Yeah, it was emotional, and it was kind of just seeing how I could kind of fit in. Leaving the train station, kind of hearing air sirens for the first time, not really seeing people flinch, kind of trying to manage my expectations, asking my boss, hey, like, what am I expecting to see? Then learning the history of kind of what really happened, because the news and like the paper, they only show you so much. So, I got there, pretty much what had happened. For anyone that lives in Edmonton, if Edmonton were Kyiv, the capital, the major airport was in St. Albert, which was like the northwest region of Kyiv. And then there was the Spruce Grove, which was Bucha. Mm-hmm. So the Russians had come down, they had targeted Spruce Grove, and the most terrible war crimes have happened that I won't even repeat. Mm-hmm. And then they had come down and tried to shut down the airport, and then they're shooting missiles from their tanks that range 20 kilometers. The suburbs kind of
circled around the downtown core, and that's where they targeted. They hit the people, not the downtown. So if they did, overtake the city, they wouldn't be damaging these buildings, but truly just a scare tactic. So learning that, it just really starts to sit in, language barrier. I'm like really just picking up on cues, and also learning 2 languages. It was very much pressed. I had to learn strictly Ukrainian because they've now severed their peace between them. But of course, quite dozens of, a fraction of the population speaks Russian because of just the intertwined cultures, whatever. There's so much back and forth where some people have an opinion saying that the Russians didn't push their culture on the Ukrainians, but many Ukrainians say they did. But irregardless, many people spoke Russian. So in turn, I was learning 2 languages. So it was very interesting. And I kid you not, I've learned a little bit of Italian. I've learned a little bit of Spanish. I've even picked up some Serbian and such Japanese. And I can't correlate anything with Ukrainian. You're really just picking up on body language. And I am, using people as translators and my transportation, so that when I go through check stops and they're looking at this Canadian girl, being assuming I was Ukrainian or Russian, there's literally someone that's this doesn't make sense why this Canadian girl is here.
Oh,
so
that would have been another thing. Now, do you think there was a challenge in would you say you tried to remain unbiased, or did you come in with kind of one of the because I think the news, or I don't even want to say the news, but how this narrative gets built is well, there's a good guy and there's a bad guy, right? And did you feel that was a narrative that you had to buy into by the job that you took?
Well, full transparency, of course I'm very heavily focused on the Ukrainian narrative, but ironically, being Ukrainian, German, and Russian, I am a conflict of interest. So I've seen war on both sides of my family, so I just kind of understand the nuance, and I agree. It's kind of interesting that we've kind of been conditioned to think that it's us versus them, and it's more complicated. Obviously, the powers that be, there's misuse of power.
For sure. It's just, I think people don't do their own research, and then what happens is we hate this guy? All right, we hate this guy, right? Where I'm sure if you came down to and it was factual and but my biggest saying is make it make sense.
Yeah,
right?
And there's propaganda on both ends, everywhere, right? Even for us, let's be honest, there's forms of propaganda that exist here, based on our media, based on all our sources of information, and half the time things are fake news. So it's you have to be discerning, you have to make your best judgment. At the end of the day, I really try to tell people I am a person of the people. I don't try to take any political stance. I am more of that humanitarian where I care about people as a collective, because I also see it on the Russian side of things. If they push back, there's repercussions for that. So what is it? I could go into a whole rant, but most Russians are Mongolian crossed and tribes people, and they're that minority that don't run the country. And many of that stereotypical Russian, they've left. They have the money to leave, and
they're
so
the oligarchs and stuff.
Yeah. So I try to just remain open. There's one quote that stays with me. I went and saw John Cleese speak live a couple years ago, and he's in his 70s, and I love his work, but he said the wisest man admits he knows nothing. So I always just try to remain in that place of curiosity, even though I don't agree with human cruelty, but I try to just remain open and understanding that unfortunately as a human species we've had to often get it wrong in order to get it right. Do I understand war? Absolutely not, but it's
hard to bridge humility with advocacy, because it's like they kind of don't go hand in hand, and it's really weird because like based on how we are as society today, it's like the action that I'm gonna make, people are gonna infer my belief. But like I could say, for instance, I go deliver food at a Sunday kitchen and I'm doing Sunday service or whatever, right? And I'm delivering meals. All of a sudden now I love homeless people, and and that's not the case, and it's not the case. You know what I mean? Like, so it's very hard for people to like just be like giving without the worry of like, oh, well, now I've chosen a side, or now I've drew my line in the sand of like what I believe and what I don't believe. And I don't know if that's necessarily fair. I think like people can just like help people out to generally help people out. And like going back to your trip to Ukraine, I think you kind of saw that firsthand, where it's like even in the middle of like a barbaric situation, people are still like supporting people in their everyday lives, and their, and how crazy that is coming from, a society like us, where I fear that it wouldn't look the same way if something like that were to happen. Like it only because like I feel that we lost like that humanity, if that makes sense. Like in some sort of way, like we are so intertwined with like what makes money make sense. I feel like a lot of people be like, yeah, I'm just gonna hunker down in my house, don't check in, don't nothing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do wonder. I remember I was visiting my friend in Toronto in March, and she's like, yeah, something happens, like she's like, I'm by myself, and I'm like, but ironically, if shit hits the fan, it's very interesting. I don't know, it's because we're mammals or what, but we do band together. It's very
instinctual.
It is.
Yeah, it's very instinctual. But even you said during your TED talk, like it's crazy how it has to get this bad for people to, and that's at some point it's like, well, we were able to tap into that part of our, brain, or our part of our like mammalian genes, but it's kind of like very worrisome that it takes like that sort of shock value for people to kind of tighten it up, if that makes sense.
I know it comes back to that self-awareness piece where I'm like, I'm just the type of person that I could walk down the street and talk to a total stranger, and okay, people would be like, well, why? But I'm like, you don't understand the ripple effect it can have, and if we all maybe just did a little bit more of that. Like a girl I just grabbed coffee with, she's like, I'm an elevator person. I will talk to a random stranger. And I'm like, that is so powerful. Like, we need more of that. Yeah. For God's sakes, like, you go downtown Edmonton, people are at the bus stop staring at their phone, pretending they're not looking at this person in a psychosis, where that person just wants to be seen. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you sat that person down and you shared a meal with them, like, how much of a difference would that make?
Yeah. And now, having this interaction with like all of these residents of Ukraine and seeing all of this, like, where, like, how did that kind of like translate into what you do? Like, what did you kind of take back with you in terms of like, again, like what you're
I really, truly value the human experience. I think you can speak yourself. Like, I think your platform speaks for itself. You're really passionate about, like, talking about people, their story. Everyone has a story. Mm-hmm. And kind of, like, what shapes us through our culture and our environment. So I feel like a very deep calling within myself to continue to advocate for communities in need. And once again, be that girl that, was flipping through National Geographic, because like photos really do speak, like, in so many words, convey so many messages and meaning. So since I got back, I've done quite a few events we were going to touch on it, but it's so funny how it felt hard while I was there to capture images of people without asking if it was appropriate to do so, because I didn't want them to feel like they were in a museum on display, because the whole part of it, it just doesn't seem ethically appropriate. But even so, coming back, I had to work with my own moral compass. Is this okay for me to monetize on people's hardship? And I made a promise that I want to reinvest into people. I want to continue to do this work. I mean, trying to find harmony between both. I mean, I could be a martyr, but I also do want to like live a happy life and trying to find harmony between both. And
was that a discussion that they had with you before you went there, of like the ethics surrounding it and like what was okay and what wasn't okay? Or was it kind of just like...
It was free for all. Yeah. And that was a huge lesson.
And it must have been a huge judgment call for you of like, I'm only going to find out when the gavel strikes and they're like, you fucked up. And you're like, what?
Yeah. It was interesting how my values really came into play. And yeah, I like stuck to my guns.
Did you find that again, I think this goes without saying, but like, did you find people's like morality, like it given that they were in a war zone, do you find like people's morality was like a lot different? Or do you find that like it's still, because we talk about the idea that people were still maintaining somewhat of like a normal life. They're going to weddings, they're doing this. But is the idea of losing someone or being in conflict or getting shot at, like those type of things that would be like unfathomable here, was that something where people were just more okay with it?
There's definitely a level of normalization, even going back to what we were talking about in regards to like the narrative that I had heard. You're kind of on the edge of your seat with all of this, and I think everyone leaning on that little thread of hope that, you know, this is going to end soon with no real end in sight. But yeah, I will full openly say that war brings out a quite interesting side of people. There's a lot of people having kids, because that's kind of, I think, the primitive response is when people start to die, people do naturally need to seek comfort, and then boom, baby spike.
Right.
I would say that people genuinely were banding together. Was there corruption? Absolutely. Does it? Yeah. People, unfortunately, I think don't always have the best of intentions, and they live out of survival mode. But yeah, it's interesting, right?
Yeah, that, and then going on to the story that we talked about with the reporters asking to like unbury a body. What was your experience with that? Was that like a very like sobering moment? Have you like, has there been anything that happened in your like photography career before that kind of you were able to understand the ethics of it, or was this like a big like shot in the heart?
It was a gut feeling. Yeah, so that whole day was really interesting. It was like 35 degrees, so super hot, like intense sun. You know, even going into the morality side of things too, like I was being escorted by a commander who's giving me access to remote spots where they defended when the war broke out in February, because they pushed the Russians back. And to add to that, like, I mean, I saw very graphic footage. I was very lucky that I didn't see any physical bodies, but I literally saw something that you'd see in Call of Duty. Like, it was, there's so many different things I could list. So having that one level of separation, that 1 degree of separation, was wonderful for that. But yeah, it was quite intense. So I'm there, I'm seeing, you know, play by play of his experience of where he was to the exact spot, people with groceries rebuilding after the fact. And then we get to this site where, you know, you just hear, like, there's not even just the fact that you see this high-rise building, broken glass, you know that people died from the shockwave. Then they pull the bodies out, they bury them, and then the news channel documented everything, came back and said, yeah, could you do it again? And you're just like, how how do you lose that humanity like inside you for clearly money?
And sometimes I was even gonna ask, like, because say you have people that are like big adrenaline people, or the idea that people can go on Reddit and watch these videos, it kind of speaks like when people are watching like drone footage of like those like the ballistic drones that are just like they attach bombs on them, fly them into, and then people are watching like drones drop bombs on people and stuff, and it kind of like speaks to this loss of humanity, right? Of like, why would you even want to watch that? Like,
yeah.
But it's very interesting because it kind of speaks to people's intention, and it speaks to people's like the everything else that is pulling them in that direction. Like where did it go wrong? Mm-hmm. Right? Like where did this person lose their ability to like actually care, right? Is it the fact that you're just in like the fact that it's just in theater now and like nobody else cares around you? So it's like it's like that mob mentality of like, well, if I was anywhere else, I would definitely care. But like here, and nobody, like everybody's just, is not okay with it, but it's like something that's like understood. So it's a lot easier for you to like fall in line or kind of like lose that ability. And then when everything goes back to normal, you travel back to Edmonton or California or whatever, it's like now you're just back to the real world. But it's like that still really is the real world, right? It's very, very, it's freaky.
Yeah.
It's very freaky.
The way I kind of see it is we seek comfortability as humans. We're actually quite simple. And even now, it's like our attention is so fragmented now that it's like, and we're so overstimulated that there's actually a lot of evidence that shows when we swipe and just everything, when we get all of that dopamine, it actually disconnects us from our frontal cortex. So we actually lose our ability to be empathetic. So our brains are actually changing to some degree, right? And I think back in the day, did people care? Well, no, they probably weren't exposed to the same information that we are now, right? Mm-hmm. So once again, self-awareness piece. Like it's weird for myself. Like I was born in the 90s, had a flip phone at 18, and now it's just like technology's skyrocketed. And I'm seeing that polarity within myself as it's advanced. And it's like, how do you keep it a tool, and how do you not forget our human connection, and like what actually brings us joy? Like how do you not lose that, especially living in a city where multiple sources of income seem to be like a necessity now with the current state of our economy. So there's so many variables, but I think we get stuck in our hamster wheel, and if we can just try to see like a bird's eye view, I don't know, that's one potential.
But I think you going and getting this experience and being able to like share that story. Now, when you come back to Canada, like what are some things that you have to keep in mind when you talk about like recounting these events? Is there certain do you feel like you have to narrate it in a certain way because it might not be like digestible for certain people? Or like how did that work when people asked you like how was it? Like was it one of those things where it's like I would love to tell you what actually happened, but like your jaw would be through the floor?
I think to some degree maybe it was as I started to really process it post. It really is dependent on maybe the person I'm engaging with. But even for myself, when I really started to deep dive and do the work internally, because I will have to admit, there is a level of PTSD that you would have. I guess I do try to keep it unfiltered. if people are prepared. I mean, I've connected with some pretty incredible Ukrainians. There's this one girl, I love her so much. She escaped from Kyiv. She lost her parents. And if anyone doesn't know, Kyiv is right on the border of Russia. So it's just, unfortunately, one of those spaces that were heavily targeted, and there's not a lot left. And she came to Canada, fortunately, because she had a relative here. And I was getting my nails done, and we're like friends for life. I will give extra clothes, extra items to her, because I do understand of that, like, starting, you know, not with a lot, and even just a first generation. So for her, like, I mean, she's got a lot to unpack. She's got to learn a whole new language, integrate into our culture, you know.
And not only that, all of like the, you know, all the societal problems that now she's a bystander to. It's like, now because I live there, now I'm like part of this by proxy, and now I have to be part of this conversation, and like, you know, how do you go anywhere without being like gauged on like, what's your opinion on this? Tell me all your stories.
She might not be ready.
Yeah.
You know, like,
yeah.
I do try to talk to her, but there's a certain level of like, if you want me to back off, I will. But she's opened up to me quite a bit, and like, when I think of grief, I think it's like a box, you know, it exists. Some people, they open it up, they lay all the pieces out, and then they put them back away when they're ready. Sometimes the box flies open because someone's triggered them.
Yeah.
And so I can relate to that to a degree as well. But I try to remain unfiltered as possible, because people want to know. I feel like the media is giving us only a small, micro-reduced version of this account, because they're not factoring in people's lives, their emotions, you know, the ripple effect that it'll have. So it's really important for people to know that. That's a big reason why I want to continue this work as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I don't want to get into the writing just yet, but the idea that starting doing the writing and recounting your experience, is that something you think you're going to continue doing and recounting, like your trip with Ukraine?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I always like would write notes in my phone. I've had dozens of journals. I actually got rid of a bunch, and now I'm kicking myself because I'm like, I would have loved to have known when I was writing 10 years ago. I was very poetic as an artist. I will, full transparency, I had something that stick with me since I was 18. I had a psychologist ask me, do you find beauty in sadness? And I was like, yeah, I do, because that's part of the human experience. It's like happiness. It's a cloud in the sky, just like every other emotion. So I love weaving that in any media possible. And I think with stories, and the whole human experience is about the sadness. There can be tragedy. We know we're not going to make it out of here unscathed.
Right.
And it's about the resilience and the perseverance, and building that kind of connection that it's like, there's no such thing as normal.
How do you stay positive with such, like, I want to say, like, shittiness? I feel like that's like the best way. That's like an overarching, like, grief. I give that my definition right now. But what do you put in place to make sure it doesn't become like morbid, if that makes sense? You're not like, sucks to suck, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going through a season of like realizing that I'm just doing a lot of internal work where I can't say every part of myself I'm in love with. But there's been times where I really have loved myself, and I think that's the key. I think if you love yourself, things start to pass through you, and your whole sense of reality changes. And I just never want to be that person that's jaded, that looks at the world black and white. Yeah, like I said, keep your feet planted on the ground, but still dream, still get excited, still try to find those things that bring you joy. Because, you know, for me, after dealing with loss, I've lost family to loneliness, heartache, shame, and I promised myself I'm going to die happy. So what does that take? That takes loving yourself. That takes doing the things that bring you happiness. And be like, to me, it's kindness. It's one of those lost arts that it's like, you know, you don't realize how much it does for you. It's like an invisible exchange.
And I think too, to carry with that as well, and it's a quote that Robert De Niro said, where it's the idea that it too shall pass. You feeling happy? It'll pass. You feeling sad? This too shall pass. You feeling anxious? This too shall pass, right? Where like everything is an experience, and like it's your choice on how you want to like take that experience, but understand that it's not forever, right? So I think it goes in both ways, because it doesn't make the lows too low, and it allows you to not have the highs too high, right? Because there's always that idea of like, well, I can't feel this way forever, right? And yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to just like being a decent person, and like understanding that, like, you know, everybody's at some point dealing with hardships but it's the idea of how can I frame this in a way that, you know, is empathetic, is respectful, and I think that's a very like lost, like that's like a lost thing. You don't see that often, right? Yeah, it's very refreshing to hear someone talk like this, because a lot of the times it's, like you said, transactional, right? And it's too bad, because like I was just interviewing a musician a couple of days ago, and we were kind of discussing like the idea of collaboration and like how beneficial that is to like someone that's creating music. And right away, like his eyes shot up, and he's like, you have no idea. And you're like, it's just, get out of there, dog. And it's just really crazy. It's the idea, like a lot of people are very like selfish in nature until they see the benefit. And then they're like, oh, maybe I need to stop being such a rigid person.
Yeah, I always look at it as like, you have this cup, and it's like, you can have everyone fill your bucket, but like, you know, what are you doing? Yours is overflowing. Why are you not
doing something?
Yeah. And it does. It really does. Like, it's even like when we see terrible things happening, we still feel it. And I know it always sounds like a cliche, but we truly are connected, you know, whatever your belief system is. So it's like, let's lean into that. Let's not forget it. You know, this whole idea of autonomy, it's like a pendulum, and I'm hoping that we kind of can find center again, because we do need each other to survive and thrive, and in every sense of the word.
Right. So tell me about how the TED Talk got into, how did that all come to fruition?
Yeah, so in my early 20s, TED Talk spiked, I want to say like 2012, 2013. They were all over YouTube. And I would say the one that stood to me the most was titled How to Overcome Infidelity with Esther Perel. And she's like a relationship expert. I just love her whole philosophy, because it actually ties into community, how we used to live in smaller pockets of people, and now we kind of have this unrealistic expectation of what a soulmate should be. Like, they should be your teacher, your confidant, your best friend, all of this person into one, when it used to be a big group of people. And it always stuck with me. I just knew in my head and my heart, I'm going to do one day. And it's weird whether you want to look at it as manifestation or not. It's weird how the seed was planted, and I just left it, forgot. And then, so when I came back from Ukraine, it was that exact next day, I'm like, I'm going to do one. And my friend that I was with was like, absolutely, you should. So then I started to kind of weigh the different scenarios. I had chatted with a girl in LA, and it was a certain specific dollar figure that would allow me to get my foot in the door and the coaching that goes with it. But I couldn't justify it because I didn't have a workshop, a program. I didn't have any return on investment, a book, you know, so it didn't really make sense. So I was like, I guess I'm just going to explore other avenues. So
this person was basically like a
coach.
like a mentor or something. Like they kind of like,
they've done it before, and
almost like gatekeeping it.
Yeah, like
to
they
a degree.
Yeah, there's a lot of people now that are offering that service. I would say that getting a TED Talk, landing a TED Talk can be competitive. For me, when I had chatted with someone else who had spoke, well, Stephanie Harp, I will shout her out. She's amazing, because since I came back, I've been actually learning more about the Indigenous narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Huge thing that we experience in our country is trying to understand these people and what's happened. And if you ever get the opportunity, her TED Talk's very powerful. But she did hers in Grand Prairie, and she was a massive cheerleader. Like, she's like, go for it. And weirdly enough, I saw an opening. I submitted my application. The guy calls me maybe a week or two later and says, how do I separate you from like 3 doctors that want your spot? And I just spoke from my heart, and he's like, you got it. So my edge was my unique experience. So I just tried to pour as much of my heart into it. I mean, sometimes I analyze it. It's a very simple message, but I think it's one that feels very forgotten.
And it's like for you, it's lived in, if that makes sense. Like it's not like it's gospel. It's like, no, I was there, and like I firsthand like saw how this like was in like actually worked in action. I never knew TED Talks were that competitive, because I thought truly it'd be like, yo, if you got something to say, like put your name in the hat. When the time comes around, we'll give you a call. But it's that idea of like everybody's looking for, like, you might have been like trying to be like, you know, I'm trying to share a story, where other people are like, I might be trying to push my brand. I might be trying to push a certain thing, right? Where then it becomes more of like I feel like whenever like something like that, like something wholesome gets like challenged with something else, it's like, oh, doesn't that just like make it like gross now? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
it becomes saturated.
Yeah, and then you're just like, oh, I don't know if I even, you know, like I remember like some people at work, they would tell me like, oh, you really need to interview this guy, blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, why? They're like, oh, he lives in his basement with his girlfriend who doesn't have and you're like, that's gross. Like, you want me to have him on to like fucking make fun of him. And like, that's not fun, right? Where it was like the idea, I was like, sure. And then once I actually found out like the process behind them, I was like, nah, I think I'm all right.
Not a right fit.
So then you got the opportunity to do the TED Talk. So what was the preparation like? Was taking your story and crafting it as like a speech? What kind of work went into that? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, during the application process, you didn't have to formulate the entire speech. You just needed your through line, your punchline. What was the bread and butter, pretty much in the essence of it. So, of course, when I got it, I'm like, where do I start? And then it did just lead to storytelling, because, I mean, a play-by-play of what it was. Like, I mean, you say it best. I'm just Canadian girl, just, you know, local photographer, like so many out there, and I'm going in with wide eyes, and what did I see that, you know, maybe people can get a glimpse, because we all play stories in our head of what that would have looked like. So yeah, I know in some situations, TED, they have people in place that will coach you through. This one was a little bit more of, you need to be in this window of time, so get it formulated all together and then fire away. They never like went through it and fine-tuned it. It was very much
rehearsals?
No.
Probably just a good sound check and then you're on your way.
That was it, which was nice for me. It kind of felt like it was a really good introduction, I think, getting more into the public speaking world. I mean, we don't have time for it, but even my origins of my character arc did not give me the opportunity to public speak. I was actually quite forbidden to do that. So it was a real transformation for me to just step up there. I was quite nervous. I spoke from my heart, and I really hope to be able to have the opportunity to go again.
Yeah, that was cool. And I've done some public speaking in the past where like you get up there and like the first thing that I noticed was like, oh my God, this room is so quiet. Like that's even watching your video, that's the first thing I was like, holy shit. Because it's like you can hear everything, right? So, and it makes it even harder. But the fact that you were able to like push through and like, and yeah, like there was no, I thought it was great. Like the message got across perfect. And I thoroughly enjoy it. And it's something that people need to hear, right? It's something that people need to hear. And like, it just comes down to like, well, who's going to do it, right? Everybody talks about it, but who's going to actually do it, right?
Another thing that's powerful too is like, you could get 10 to 20 books. They all have the same message, but it's how people use this, like, metaphors. You never know what will resonate. So it's like it might be the same message, but it's clearly it'll resonate with the right people that need to hear it.
Going into that, like public speaking and like doing all that, now you're getting into like writing. Where did the involvement come in that? Because it looks like it was a piece that was like a collaborative effort with a lot of different people. So how did that come to fruition?
So yeah, since I've returned, I've been working a lot of like entrepreneurial women's conferences, and doing some public speaking at some of those events, and actually photography with them as well. And I had gone to one in particular where they were, a lady was selling this book saying that this is her life account and they're taking applications. And so I just really have been thinking a lot about sharing my own personal story. I've had some pinnacle moments in my life, and there's wisdom through those experiences. So like I said, it's always so funny when I think about hardship, because like I said, there's beauty and sadness, but maybe someone would interpret it where, oh, I feel bad for you, I pity that person, and it's not meant to be that way. It's you can overcome so much. And I think of people that are less fortunate, where they've completely internalized their experience, they feel isolated and alone, and my hopes are to allow people to feel like this is okay. You can overcome hardship, trauma. You can transcend those experiences. It's like it takes time for your brain to process it, power cycle it. The only reason why it gets stuck is because we freeze in those situations, right? And obviously there's different ways of, different modalities of handling that. You have to find out what works for you. But like I said, you don't go through life unscathed. Yeah. Actually, if you didn't, I think that would probably be kind of boring. Yeah. Because if you were given a user's manual for life and you had no experiences, what sort of, like, what would you tell about your life after that?
Well, it's funny you say that. They talk about, in this interview I was watching, the guy talks about, like, if you were creating the ideal human, like, what would you want them to be? Like, you would want them to be brave. Okay, well, how do you make someone brave? Okay, you would want them to be, like, in tune with their surroundings, or like, what's the word? You'd want them to be able to, like, telegraph things. And okay, well, how do you do that? Like, it takes experience. You'd want them to be, like, emotionally regulated. Well, what comes with that? It's like all of what earns that is like the turmoil and like the kind of conflict that comes with that. So it's like you can't get to like the ideal person if you're not going through that, right?
Like baptized through fire.
Yeah.
Well, what is that saying where it's hard times build strong men?
Strong men build easy times build soft men, yeah. Soft men create hard times create hard men. But yeah, and I think the idea too is like, you kind of people have to know that it's going to happen, right? And I think like the fear that, it can't be me. And then it happens, and then you're like, oh shit, right? But Yeah, the idea that you have to have some internal struggle, and I think it's a lot to do with like finding out like what your identity is. Like I think that's a big thing of like people don't know how they identify as, and like I think that's a very taboo term right now because I think a lot of it relates back to like gender. But when I ask people what they identify as, I mean like when someone asks you what you do, like what do you tell them? Right? Like when someone asks them like what do you like, what do you tell them, right? Who you are. Like that's what I mean about like identity. And a lot of times like the question falls and it's like I ask the question, it's like a stalemate because a lot of people they just can't like because they find it's shameful, they find it's corny, they're worried about mockery, like and it's too bad. It's too bad that dealing with like that internal conflict or like dealing with like the idea of healing is like something that's a notion of like shame, right? Or like I shouldn't feel like this because like there's homeless people or like the war going on here or the war going on there and like I shouldn't feel this way because like but it's the idea that like this is an experience that's not like exclusive to one set of people, right? And it's really interesting. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And to add to that as well, it's interesting how oftentimes with healing and the emotional healing, it can manifest like almost like physical pain. So we avoid it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's another big thing too, is like people don't know how to like interpret the pain and they don't know how to like work through it because it's just like they're like some people are like they're chained, like they're shackled by just like they want to sleep all day or they can't, you know, and that must be hard. And again, like you said, people have to find their own way of able to get through this, right? Some people it might be fitness, other people it might be time alone, some people it might be social, right? So it's all different things. But when you created this piece of writing, like what were you trying to like what was the message you were trying to share?
It's unearthed a lot of my own personal experience. Ultimately, the way I see it, and this it's such a personal thing. I think that I've been seeking achievement because we're all kind of pushed to do that, and this project is something that I just had to do for myself. It's actually quite similar to my TED Talk too. It was really because I didn't have a book, because I didn't have a program, I don't have anything that's going to convert into sales. It really was personally for me and part of my art. And the way I've been kind of steering it is like when you think of the greatest artists out there, like Picasso or Van Gogh or Da Vinci, it's like, did they do it to be successful or did they do it because it was their expression, because they did it because they loved it, and that's how they became who they are.
Right.
So I'm trying to lean into that more of that side, and that's mainly what that piece is to just focus on just doing it for me and seeing where it goes from there.
And to backpack off that, the amount of, I wouldn't say coercion, but the amount of external support that a lot of those artists need, that not a lot of like that history doesn't really track well of, like when you talk about Van Gogh, a lot of times people don't talk about the fact that like Van Gogh's wife was a huge advocate for him to get his pieces into art galleries, and if it wasn't for his wife, he would have never succeeded the way he did, because he was going to give up, he was going to this, and it was his wife that actually like was advocating for him to bring his pieces to art galleries. So it kind of speaks to this idea of community and like how you have to allow like people support around you, right?
Totally.
Yeah. Talking about your legacy and kind of what's next for you, like what kind of projects do you have on the go?
So I've got a few things happening. So something that I think is really important to share that's been heavy on my mind, that I'm still kind of finding my place. So you've got one end of the spectrum for charity organizations, global charity organizations, like something like the United Nations. If you were to give $100 to the cause, 10 cents would make it to those in need because of the trickle down.
Right.
And then you've got the other end of the spectrum where they're grassroots, they're really trying to build their way up, and they mainly gain all of their heart and all of their effort really comes from people volunteering their time. So I've been in contact with someone recently, and she does advocate funding, which is a third party, and I actually am really excited. It's still, things are in motion. I'm kind of just trying to see how things will come to fruition, but I think it's a really great starting point because it holds us both accountable. It'll be a subcontract thing, it'll be project to project basis. There's just like a level of complacency and the level of accountability and trust that needs to start to build before you can do something, because unfortunately most organizations there is a level of corruption, and that's why many people don't want to donate.
Yeah.
They feel like their hands are tied, and I don't blame them. I mean, like, if you are, you know, young parents, you have kids, of course you're going to support the greatest cause in need, which is your family. So I'm really trying to bridge the gap on that. I grappled a lot of wanting to just, like I said, be a martyr, go on my own dollar, but factoring in, if I were to go back to Ukraine, I'm not necessarily concerned about my physical health. I'm concerned about my emotional health, my mental health, because that's what I take home with me. If I think to myself, if I did have a child, I don't want that to stay with me and then having direct impact. So I'm very mindful of those things. Do I want to go back? Absolutely.
Would it be with the same intention though? Like, would it be under like the same like motivation? Yeah. Or would it be like a different, you know, because when you went back first, it was a whole new experience and everything. And now going back, does like your objective kind of change, or like your way that you want to handle things?
It would be a little bit different, but I would continue to wanting to interview people, talk about people. Once you like the eyes, faces, you really start to like see the soul, like I said, of that person, and bringing to that, you know, through mixed media to the forefront of people's mind. I think people can connect deeper. But my hopes were to go back, contribute in some way, maybe work with donating goods to frontline communities, capturing images, continuing to do events to raise awareness with what the media is not discussing.
Yeah, for sure. And on that, so that's kind of your big thing that you have. Now, when you say advocate funding, what exactly does that mean? Like, would you be the advocate? Is that like...
You could get someone that would do it on behalf of you. I have someone in mind.
Okay.
It would really depend on the scope of the project, but
right. Okay.
Companies, grants, that kind of thing, it would probably be a lengthier process.
Right.
Yeah, I could never see myself doing a GoFundMe.
No.
It doesn't seem appropriate. I really want, even with my art shows, there's a few events that I was doing that was a shared space. Having those prints, you know, reinvest so that people actually can see where their money is going. You know, art that has impact, like that's important to me.
So when you look at like your journey and doing photography, advocating, interviewing, you know, going to these places and gaining these experience, what does like success look like for you? What does that actually mean? Like, is there an end goal? Is there like a point that you're trying to reach? Is it milestones? How do you kind of interpret that?
I kind of laugh because it's like, I think for many people, it's like climbing at the top of a mountain and like seeing the top. And I feel like I've made it so far and I don't even know what the top looks like. I also try to explain the analogy of like, I've got the humanitarian, I've got the interviews, I've got the photography, all these little threads. How can I weave it together into one? And it's, I guess, still in that phase of exploration. So I'm kind of just remaining open. I'm trying to see, because once again too, as artists, even like musicians, It's like people aren't specific genres. They're like subgenres. They're like hybrids. So that's kind of the way I see it. It's like it's not as black and white. And I guess my feeling that I really want to instill is a sense of community in a very displaced, you know, sense of community, especially on the digital landscape. I want to take influencing a step further, and I want to see impact. I want to create impact. That's my goal.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I honestly, like, kudos to you. I think you're doing amazing work. I've really enjoyed all of the content as well as the conversation that I had with you today.
Thank you.
I think this is more than something that needs to be done, and I think you're doing it absolutely the right way. It takes a lot of courage alone to just start, and you've done more than that, and now you're starting to like flourish where you see like the amount of, I want to say, humility as well as like gratitude, right? Like it seems like it's a reciprocal thing, right? Like you want to help people because then in turn you're getting that like self-fulfillment, right? But it really is for like the cause of like you want to see a community build back up again, which is a very like less sought after thing in a world that is very attributing success to dollars, right? And I'm very, very grateful that I was able to sit here and have a conversation with you, and it gives me a lot to think about as what I want to do and how I want to, you know, help my community and how I want to prop people up. So I definitely thank you for that. Is there any final things you'd like to send the audience off with? Anything that you'd like to say before we log off?
Well, thank you for having me today.
Of course.
Yeah. I can't really say off the top of my head other than just be a good person.
Yeah, of course. And I think that's more than, you know, that's more than enough. I think at the end of the day, being a good person and just like caring about your neighbors and stuff like that it's a step in the right direction, right? At the very least, you can just be a nice person, right? With that has been another episode of Solo Spotlight. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Supporting our channel helps us have conversations like these all the time. And Katanya Timinsky. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.